back. Now, last week, the Court of Appeal overturned a suspended sentence that was given to former soldier Cathal Crotty for his assault on Natasha O'Brien in 2022.
Natasha joins us now to react to the verdict. Good morning.
Good morning,
Good
Natasha. It's lovely to have you here. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you here.
Very different circumstances.
Yes,
I was here
definitely.
7 months ago.
A lot's happened.
Well, since you were on the show last time, you were here when Cathal Crotty had just been given the suspended sentence for assaulting you on O'Connell Street in Limerick in 2022. Now, for people who may not be familiar with the story, do you mind giving us a brief overview of what happened that night?
Yeah, so June 22, I was walking home from work. Myself and my friend were getting a taxi together. You know, it's safer to walk with friends. You know, it's safer to not walk alone at night. And we were just walking home, and then we noticed this group of boys in front of us just shouting really homophobic slurs across the road at this young lad by himself. And it was just an automatic impulse to just kind of, my friend said first, "Hey lads, don't be calling anyone a," and then I just chimed in then and I said, "Don't be using those words." And it was so polite, it wasn't, and then one of the males in that group then ended up attacking me and beating me unconscious, and his friend stood there and watched, and my friend was there frozen in fear, screaming for help, and he was still beating me, and it wasn't if it wasn't for a passerby that heard my friend screaming and pulled him off me, because he wasn't stopping. I was, so that was horrendous, and I reported it, and then we had, and then I was waiting 2 years. I didn't really know if there was going to be a trial, and I spent 2 years kind of living, wondering what was happening, just trying to pick up the pieces of my. You
had, we have to make clear in this assault, we all know the infamous words now, two to put her down, two to knock her out.
Yeah.
We know this now. You were taken to hospital, your brain wasn't okay. You were, you were blacking out, there was bad things that were happening to you.
Yeah, 3-month concussion, and I ended up having to go out to the hospital a month later to get another brain scan for, high risk of brain bleed. So it was terrifying, for 3 months. It wasn't just that night. For 3 months I feared for my life.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that one night.
Yeah.
It was 3 months wondering, am I going to wake up when I go to sleep tonight? Am I going to wake up tomorrow?
Yeah.
So.
And it led to nationwide protests. There was standing ovation in the Dáil. You were having to deal with all of this while also processing the long-term effects of the attack.
Well, I suppose the reason I got a phone call 5 days before the sentencing that went so totally wrong last June.
Originally, yeah.
The original sentence, so that went just totally heads up. 5 days before that, I was asked, do I want to write a victim impact statement? And I'm living in this country. I'm aware of the constant sentences, the lenient, the just ignoring violent crimes. I read it all the time. I see all sorts of sentences. They're assault walks free, this walks free, and I was like, okay, this horrible thing happened to me, but I have an opportunity here to do something about it. And so I just feel like I just feel it's bigger than me. It's not just about what he did to me. It's about what people get away with all the time. It's about the violence that is constantly enabled and excused in court. So I said, I'm going in there and I am begging that judge. And in the last words of my victim impact statement back in June, I said, Your Honour, I'm not here to seek justice just for myself. I'm here to ask you to help protect all future and potential victims from the violence and malice I experienced. And he did not do that at all. He did not hear that. He did not listen. And I think about victim impact statements, and I think about Lavinia Kerwick, who waived her anonymity back in 1992. And, because there was no such thing as a victim impact statement, and Lavinia said, no, a victim needs a voice. And 30 years on, the victim has a voice, but does anyone listen? So I went up there, I got to read it, but I don't think for 1 second anything I said in that statement was taken into account in the actual sentencing. So, that's what enraged me so much, that I went in there, I did that, I faced my attacker, I stood up there, I begged the judge to simply not allow this violence, because it just asked him, please do not allow this. And that was ignored. So that led to uproar.
And let's be honest, there was activations, people led to the street. You got on the street, you spoke from the heart so much. You put yourself into a very vulnerable position, but it was an incredibly strong position. And the people of Ireland got behind you. It was phenomenal, phenomenal to see. And people really did start having these conversations.
Yeah.
And then on Thursday, the Court of Appeal overturned the suspended sentence of Cathal Crotty. Natasha, how did you feel about that?
Well, like, first of all, I'd just like to say that, you know, if it hadn't been for all the support from the nation, from people from across the country and the media, like constantly, you know, everyone constantly talking and keeping this conversation going, I don't think it would have been that result last Thursday. I think because we all collectively, and like, even like when I went into Leinster House a couple of times and met different leaders of different parties, we all had the same common goal. And I think it wasn't political. It had nothing got to do with whoever you were from, wherever. It was just, we don't want an anarchy. We want violence to be, you know, we want there to be, you know, consequences for violence. And that was so universal. And we were all, I was so outspoken about it, and so many people were outspoken too, agreeing. And there was just so much support. And I think there was a total loss of confidence in the justice system. I feel like the whole of Ireland started to question, would I be safe if this happened to me? Because, you know, people walk home from work. Could that happen to me? You know, so it was very real. It was a real fear that, you know, I've lived, like Natasha, I lived my whole life without, you know, being a victim, and then all of a sudden I was. So, you know, it's very real that, you know, you would want the system to protect you.
Well, you've said you're quite conflicted about it because you...
Yeah, so I went into court on Thursday, and it was, you know, I had my tail between my legs. I really wasn't expecting any result, you know, because I had been used to just being totally ignored. So then I sat there in the court, and when it came to the decision at 3:00, they spent a long time going over and back, and, you know, they spoke a lot about public deterrence and the necessity for a sentence to deter crime, because that was everything I was. So I think at this point I was just getting so emotional. I was like shaking, I was trembling, because everything I had cried out about that had been ignored was being spoken about with the judges. And I remember it was coming towards the decision. I remember Justice Kennedy saying, violence on our streets is far too common. We see it all the time. Whether you're a man or a woman, you deserve to feel safe walking the streets. You deserve to be safe in this country. And we, as the courts, have a duty to, you know, give a sentence that deals with the offence and not the job. They said that, you know, putting so much weight on a job and employment, well, no, too bad. If you lose your job because of your conviction, well, that's your fault. That's a consequence of your actions. And it's not your job as a judge to be considering those aftermath things, you know, because the initial judge protected his career in the army. But nevertheless, it was really, really hard to sit there as a human, you know, like, because you know I know I deserve justice. I know what happened to me was wrong, and it should be totally, you know, it should not be accepted in any way. But to see just when I removed myself from my own personal stuff, I was very emotional, and it was heartbreaking to see a young person being sent to a horrible place, because it didn't feel good. I walked out of that courtroom and it didn't feel like a win. And while so much of Ireland celebrated, and there is a lot to celebrate, I mean, I am so happy that the courts have absolutely put their foot down and say, no, we're not accepting violence. No, sentences need to send a message. Sitting in that room, seeing that family, seeing that person be sent, knowing they're not getting sent to a nice place. They're not getting sent to a positive place where they will, you know, I don't believe, or, well, I don't really know, but I don't believe that we have the best resources and the best, you know, emotional, psychological intervention, and, you know,
to actually rehab inside prison, because we know the prison services are under. I think you're phenomenal to in that space, something that has taken over your life for 2 years, when you were a person who was walking down a road and everything has changed.
Yeah.
To have the capacity to feel for him in that way, it's truly amazing, Natasha. But what you have actually changed the course of Irish life, the things that
I
have
hope
happened.
so.
Like, I just wonder how you feel about this. 68 members of the Defence Forces have been convicted or charged with criminal offences, whether it's public order, domestic violence, drugs, physical violence, all that kind of stuff. You call for the Defence Forces to do your job to protect women and other civilians. This was of June of last year.
Yeah.
Things have changed since then. They have started investigating
Yeah.
what is happening within the Defence Forces.
Amazing.
Military officers no longer go into court wearing their uniform. This is something. What was that like? Because they're not doing that anymore. They no longer give evidence about the accused service record.
I feel like crying.
You changed that.
I feel like crying.
Because what was that like being in there?
It
and
was a
seeing
personal
the uniform?
attack. It was a personal attack. You know, I was just stood down from giving my victim impact statement for the commandant to go straight up after me. It was like a debate, you know, when you hear the opposition of government and then you hear the government coming in like, no, no, no. You know, it was like that, where the opposition were saying, here's the problem, here's how the public are being affected. And then in comes the government going, oh, we did this and that and the other. That was like what I felt like. I'm going, this is how much my life has been destroyed. And then off goes the commandant, well, he was an exemplary soldier. And I'm like,
how can this be true?
Yeah.
Having affected that change, all of these things, and people looking at the Defence Force and going, no, sorry, it's not okay. There's serious convictions. How does it feel to have made that impact? And what's next?
it feels like it's very hard to feel the tangible impact. And I think that will be, time will tell. But I do think that, you know, justice for one person, justice for me, you know, if I want justice for me is privilege. It has to be justice for everyone. And, you know, if it's just me because I screamed and shouted and, you know, didn't allow people to ignore me and forced people to hear me, you know, well, that's not entirely fair, because I was able to do that because I'm just an outspoken person. I am that kind of a person. But there are so many people out there that don't have that capacity, don't have that privilege, don't have so much, and it's too difficult, and they can't advocate for themselves. And that is why I did this in the first place and embarked on this. I wasn't looking for my own selfish justice. Going into the appeal last week, I had no kind of personal gain out of it. I just wanted to be done. But, you know, I really do feel that when I see this for everyone that doesn't have to open their mouth, because shouldn't be a system of silence. It should be a system of protection. And, you know, I have so much more work to do. I definitely want to continue. This is a great step. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
And I'm so, so grateful. And I could never possibly have believed that a judge would fully acknowledge and see and hear me. But yeah.
It's incredible what you've done.
So much more.
We can't wait to see what you do next, because your voice is one that people really listen to.
Yeah,
and for coming on and speaking to us again, Natasha.
Yeah.
You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're fantastic.
Thank
it's
you so
great to
much.
hear.
Thank you.
It's so good. 0896 111 111 to get in contact with this wonderful woman, Natasha O'Brien.